Thank you for choosing to watch this video, in which I'll be tying a variation of my Nunton Olive pattern. For ease simplicity, I'll call this the Nunton Claret. Start by mounting your hook in the vise and testing the hold. Here I'm using one of Floss Mill's comp heavyweights, size 12. Then catch your thread on. In this case I'm using some of Semperfli's classic waxed thread in the Claret, size 12 knot. Trim away the waste end, then I'll catch in the tail material at this point to save bulk in the body. The tail for this fly is some Glo-Brite floss in a pink. So catch it in on top of the hook with a pinch and loop. Pull it to leave space for the head of the fly, and then bind down in touching turns. Check that you've tail sitting nicely on top of the hook. At this point you could probably tweak it around if you needed to. As you form the underbody, if you hold the floss tail under a bit of tension and up at an angle, it will help the thread wraps lie close together or touching. You tie the tail end down to roughly where the barb would be on a barbed hook. That should be fine, and then we'll catch in the rib. The rib in this one is some gold wire. I'm using some UTC wire in small for this one. Catch it in on the underside of the hook and bind down up to the head of the fly. Make sure the wire runs up to the tie-in point for the tail to keep a nice smooth underbody. And then at this point we can tidy up the tie-in point for the tail as well. Once you've got that done, I'll move the rib around on the right side of the fly so it's in position for when I want to palm with a hackle. For once I remember to do this. And I'll trim the tail to length at this point. And the length of the tail is probably down to personal preference to an extent, but I like to aim for roughly about the length of the body of the fly. This one looks a little bit longer. Next we'll tie in the body material at the top of the body where we tied the tail in. I'm just prepping the end of it to make sure it's neat and tidy when I tie it in. Should mention the body material on this one is some of Floss Mill's Streamer Straggle Micro UV in light claret. So using this in place of a dubbed body has a nice bit of movement, flash and sparkle to it. It's a great replacement for dubbing on palmered flies and wet flies. A very useful material generally. So you tie that down to the end of the body in line with the tail and the rib, and take your thread back up, making sure everything's neat and tidy. And then wind the body in touching turns, making sure to hold the straggle under a bit of tension, and brush the fibres back a little as you're winding it, just to avoid trapping too many. Take your time and try and keep the body as smooth as possible and cover all the underbody. You have to be careful with using this body material that you don't crowd the eye too much, and you've got space to tie in the two hackles and tie off the rib. Leaving about eye diameter clear should be enough. Catch in with a few wraps of thread and a turn in front or turn or two in front. Then trim away the waist end as neatly as you can. Just tidy up the tie-in point a bit. You don't need to worry about it too much because we can tidy it up again while we tie in the hackle and in the rib afterwards we've wound the hackle. So, catching your hackle here, I'm using a Whiting Farms Red Label genetic hen in hot orange. Catch it in with a few turns of thread and then bind down the tip backwards and break away the waist end. Then wind our palmer hackle Try and keep the turns of hackle nice and even. Catch it in with the wire and rib up in nice open turns again. If you're keeping the angle of the wire even, your turns should be nice and even. Once you've got the wire to the head of the fly ready to catch in, try and avoid catching too many of the hackle barbs going forward. Once you've tied the wire in, you can break away the hackle tip and helicopter off the wire, and then we'll fold everything back, make sure we're not trapping in going forward, and we'll tidy up the tying point ready for the head hackle. The head hackle on this fly is a claret dyed hen pheasant feather taken from a Chevron Hackles hen pheasant cape. Catch in the feather by the tip, a couple of turns of thread, fold back the tip and secure, and we can isolate the tip and break it away. This feather has a lovely colour and a nice subtle pattern to it, and should have lovely movement in the water. We don't want to go too heavy on the hackle on this fly, but 2 or 3 turns of this feather should be plenty. Doubling it back as we wind it, trying to make sure we don't take any of the body hackle with us. Once you're happy with the hackle, catch in with a couple of turns of thread, and then again fold everything back and secure, forming a nice neat head. Do take your time and make sure you're not trapping any of the hackle barbs pointing the wrong way if you can avoid it. The head's starting to look okay, and it should be more than secure enough, so I'll break away the waist hackle, and then should be good to whip finish, making sure we're not going to trap any hackle barbs. 3-turn whip finish should hold this fly plenty well enough. Trim away the thread. Then we'll brush out the fly with some Velcro to pull out the body fibres into the hackle and make sure everything's secure and sitting where we want it to. That's looking pretty good to me. All that remains now is to finish the head of the fly. For this I'm using some of Raidzap's thin UV resin. You'll notice I've trimmed down the brush applicator. This helps me keep the application of the resin nice and neat and avoid it going into the hackle too much. You see, take your time applying the resin so you don't clog either the hook or get any of the resin into the hackle or other materials. I'm noticing a bit of fluff caught in the head of the fly, so I'll tweak that out before I set the resin, and then set the resin with a UV torch, and that's the fly finished. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please drop it a like and subscribe to my channel to be kept up to date on any future videos. As always, any feedback or questions are always welcome.